On our 5th wedding anniversary, my wife's male assistant posted a tweet. In the photo, I saw my lost wedding ring on his ring finger. With you for the rest of my life. Please take care of me. There wasn't the slightest ripple in my heart. I liked the post and commented, wish you happiness, but the ring doesn't look quite right. Just a few seconds later, my wife called me. What are you doing? Why are you arguing with a child? I was just letting him wear your wedding ring for fun. Why do you have to be so petty? On the other end of the phone, the little assistant complained pitifully. My wife comforted him gently. It's okay. He's useless without me. Don't worry about him. I hung up the phone. 5 years of love had ultimately become a joke. Leaving the divorce papers on the table, I turned around and left. Chapter 1. When Joanna came home, it was already past midnight. As soon as she walked through the door, I could smell the strong alcohol on her. Without even looking up, I quietly cleaned the mess on the table. The steak on the table had been waiting for a full 5 hours and was already cold. The wine that had been uncorked was now more like aged vinegar after such a long wait. After clearing the candles from the table, I sat down and nonchalantly put the cold steak into my mouth. It was high-quality Wagyu beef, quite expensive. Joanna sneered when she saw it. If you ask me, you're just so unrefined, she said. Why are you holding onto a cold piece of meat? Just throw it away. As she spoke, she waved the bag she was holding. Look, I brought you something to eat. This is from Domi, specially for you. Really, you're already this old, and you're still less mature than a guy who's just started working. She was slurring her words, a little unclear as she spoke. Ever since she reached her current position, she rarely drank to the point of losing control like this. I stayed silent and didn't respond, continuing to eat the steak by myself. She seemed a bit unhappy and slapped the plate in front of me, knocking it over. She placed both hands on the table, her blurry eyes showing signs of anger. Eat, eat, eat. You still have the nerve to eat. Don't you realize that because you've been sarcastic in his comment section, how is he supposed to hold his head high in front of his co-workers? He's just a guy who needs love. What's wrong with that? I warn you. Apologize to him right now. As she spoke, she pulled out her phone and dialed Dominic's number. It was picked up almost immediately. What's up, sis? It's been so short since we parted. Already missing me? His overly dramatic voice made me feel nauseous. I couldn't even swallow the steak in my mouth. Joanna's cold expression melted instantly, replaced by a warm smile. Domi, you're such a good boy. I'm teaching Romeo a lesson for you right now. Be good. I'll make him apologize to you. She shoved the phone in front of me. I kept eating, not even looking up, mechanically chewing. Joanna was now angry, slamming her hand down on the table with a tone full of command. Romeo, didn't you hear me? Apologize. You're over 10 years older than him and you still don't know basic manners. Don't you feel ashamed that Domi specially bought you supper? Do you even know how to be grateful? On the other end of the phone, Dominic said something that made Joanna's expression soften, a hint of bashfulness creeping into her tone. Ah, didn't I just reward you, you little rascal? In the past, if I had heard her talking like this with another man, I would have probably exploded in anger. But now, I just wanted to quietly fiddle with my knife and fork, shoving piece after piece of cold, hard steak into my mouth. The two of them chatted for a full 20 minutes before Joanna reluctantly hung up the phone. All right, baby, you hang up first, she said, baby, with such familiarity. I couldn't help but look up at her. Our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of discomfort in her eyes. But soon, she became a little angry and said, what are you looking at? It's just a nickname. What's the big deal? I nodded, speaking calmly. Indeed, there's no need to care. Joanna stared at me for a moment, perhaps feeling awkward. After clearing her throat a few times, she said, I'll go heat up the food. Don't eat that cold steak. The food from their place is pretty good. With that, she grabbed the bag and went into the kitchen. It was just a few minutes to heat up some food, but she ended up spending over 20 minutes in the kitchen. When I had finished the steak and was about to take my plate to the sink, I noticed that Joanna was holding the freshly heated food with one hand while the other was holding her phone, staring at the screen with a glazed look. I walked over to her, glancing at the lit-up phone screen. It was a message from someone named Baby Joe. I miss you so much. Do you know? Even though I was drunk, I did it on purpose. I just wanted to collapse into your arms and wake up next to you in bed. Chapter 2. I couldn't help but shiver, a wave of goosebumps covering my skin. I really couldn't understand how Joanna could possibly fall for such a greasy and disgusting man. Joanna was still oblivious to my presence, placing the food down and quickly typing a reply. Good boy. Sis will find time to be with you. Just as she was about to send it, she turned around and bumped directly into my chest. Ah, what are you doing? When she realized it was me, Joanna jumped in surprise, but quickly hid her phone behind her back, her voice filled with anger. Why are you sneaking up on me? Are you trying to spy on me and snoop through my phone? Her face twisted in a grimace, trying to cover up her nervousness with a fierce demeanor. I didn't respond, staying silent as she shoved me away and forced the hot food into my hands. Eat this. Domi picked it out specially for you. I'm not hungry. I placed the plate aside and tossed the steak knife and fork into the sink, but as I turned around, a spoonful of food was suddenly pressed against my lips. Is it going to kill you to just eat one bite? Joanna glared at me angrily. If you don't eat it today, we're not done. Annoyed, I rubbed my forehead. I had planned to just go along with it to get her to stop bothering me, but just as I opened my mouth, I caught a strong smell of peanut butter. Before I could close my mouth, Joanna shoved the spoon forward, almost forcing it down my throat. I didn't even have time to chew or taste the food before it was swallowed. This was bad. I pushed her away and rushed to the trash can, desperately trying to gag and get the food out of my throat, but Joanna wasn't happy. What's your problem? This is Domi's kindness, and you're treating it like this. She yanked my arm, grumbling angrily. You're in your 30s and still don't know how to appreciate things. I'm telling you, if you don't eat all of it today, we're getting a divorce. As I continued to cough, my eyes fell on the food container in her hand. I immediately saw the peanuts scattered on top, and the thick layer of peanut butter. Hearing Joanna's threat, my heart sank to the depths of despair. After all these years, didn't she know that I was allergic to peanuts? The pain in my stomach was starting to intensify, and I couldn't wait any longer. I stood up and pushed her away, rushing out of the kitchen. Joanna was even more furious now. You're pushing me. Do you still have the nerve to be angry? Where are you going? Come back and finish the food. I ignored her and started searching through the living room, but the medicine cabinet, which I always kept in the drawer of the coffee table, was nowhere to be found. What are you doing? Joanna asked, but I didn't answer. I just kept searching frantically for the medicine cabinet. The sharp pain and tightness in my chest were making my head spin, and I could barely stand. Joanna paused for a moment, her brows furrowed deeply. It can't be. Are you trying to tell me the food's poisoned just to badmouth Domi? Romeo, when did you become this low? I couldn't afford to argue with her. The suffocating feeling in my chest made me start coughing uncontrollably, and my skin was beginning to turn red. Seeing this, Joanna panicked. What's wrong with you? Medicine, give me the medicine. I managed to get the words out after struggling for a while. Joanna seemed to have realized something, and her face turned awkward. Well, Domi and I just moved to a new place, and I was worried he might not have a medicine cabinet. So, you don't worry. I'll take you to the hospital right now. Chapter 3. The shock of the situation seemed to snap Joanna out of her drunken state. She quickly fumbled to help me up. We stumbled down the stairs and, upon reaching the garage, I opened the back seat of the car, but the moment I looked inside, I froze. The floor in front of the seat was covered in crumpled tissues, and on the backrest of the seat was a men's pair of underwear, clearly tossed there in a hurry, standing out like a sore thumb. Joanna noticed it too, and her face instantly changed. She stammered as she tried to explain. That a few days ago, Domi and I went swimming. I guess he must have forgotten it when he changed clothes. I looked at the underwear, and the fabric was clearly marked with a stain, one that could only have come from recent use. A scene flashed through my mind, Joanna and Dominic together in the back of the car, tangled up with each other. But at that moment, the suffocating feeling in my chest made it impossible for me to care about her excuses. I quickly tossed the underwear and tissues out of the car window, feeling weak as I sat down. What are you doing? Joanna was upset, rushing to pick up the underwear and carefully folding it. She then placed it into her bag. This is a designer brand. It wasn't cheap. Domi just got promoted, so buying this wasn't a small expense. You can't just throw it away. Her carefulness with the underwear was like a stab to my eyes, but I no longer had the energy to argue with her. After all, what's the point in caring about a woman who's already gone bad? As we neared the hospital, Joanna's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, slammed on the brakes, and parked the car on the side of the road before answering the call. Sis, I'm feeling so sick in my stomach. Can you come be with me? I can't sleep without you by my side. Dominic's pitiful voice echoed from the other end of the line, making the cramped space in the car feel even more suffocating. All right, I'm coming right now. Joanna barely hesitated. She turned the car around, heading in the opposite direction of the hospital. Hang on, Romeo. Domi really needs me right now. I have to go. I couldn't help but let out a self-deprecating laugh. So Dominic's longing was more urgent than my near-death allergic reaction. Chapter 4. The car came to a stop, but Joanna didn't forget to warn me not to move around before hurriedly heading upstairs. I was left alone in the car, trying to force myself to breathe, trying to calm the suffocating heaviness in my chest, but Joanna, perhaps worried I would cause trouble, locked the car. Minutes passed, and I started sweating coldly, my face pale in the rearview mirror. I realized I had to get to the hospital quickly. I took out my phone and dialed emergency services, but when the paramedics arrived, they couldn't reach Joanna. Finally, at my suggestion, they chose to break the window. At the hospital, after an examination, the doctor's face grew serious. Your allergic reaction is severe. If you had waited any longer, it could have been life-threatening. Given how low your oxygen levels are, I recommend you stay in the hospital for observation. You should also have someone at home to look after you. I thought for a moment and called my assistant from the company. Throughout the entire ordeal, I received no messages from Joanna. It wasn't until the next morning that she finally called me. I checked the time, it was already 7 a.m. It seemed she'd only remembered me after enjoying the night with Dominic. Romeo, are you crazy? Why did you smash the car? What if it was stolen by bad people? The bitterness in my heart deepened. I thought she might feel guilty, but the first thing she mentioned was the car. She didn't even acknowledge the fact that she had locked me in the car while I was severely allergic. I replied flatly, so you only called because of the car? I bought the car myself. If it's damaged, then so be it. Hearing my tone, Joanna softened a little. I'm not mad, honey. Besides, it's our joint property. I'm just a little irritated because I couldn't get to work without the car. Work? I couldn't help but shake my head and scoff. Since the car is broken, you should just stay at home and rest. The house is too boring. I'll come to the office to find you and bring you breakfast. Domi said there's a great place for soup dumplings. She spoke with such enthusiasm, and I remained cold as ice. It seemed like she had completely forgotten about the incident with me in the car. No need to bother. Just take care of your Domi. As soon as I finished speaking, Joanna got angry. What's with the attitude? It's just that I forgot to leave you in the car. Why didn't you call me? Why smash the car? Domi cares about you, and he asked me to bring you breakfast, and you still won't appreciate it. I frowned, clearly annoyed. I'm not hungry. I don't feel like eating. Joanna raised her voice sharply, her pretty face twisted in anger. Romeo, you're just jealous of Domi, aren't you? We're just siblings. What's wrong with me staying at his place? You have such a dirty mind, thinking everything is suspicious. We're innocent, so you better stop making trouble for yourself. Chapter 5. Joanna and I met in college. She was a dance major, a year younger than me. At the time, it was her who pursued me. As the saying goes, when a woman chases a man, it's like a veil of gauze, and I found it almost impossible to resist her enthusiasm. I couldn't help but fall for her. I promised myself I would cherish her, hold her in the palm of my hand, and take care of her as much as possible. She was always passionate about starting her own business, so I asked my father to help her join my company. I made sure to clear the path for her career growth, offering her the occasional green light when needed. I didn't need her to know that everything was because of my efforts. I just wanted her to be happy. But as her status grew, so did her arrogance. Now, she openly cheated and even tried to manipulate me with PUA tactics. On the video call, Joanna was still complaining incessantly. I noticed her lips were swollen, and I couldn't help but sneer internally. It seemed she hadn't forgotten to get entangled with Dominic before leaving. Anyway, you should try to be more magnanimous. Your current life wouldn't be possible without my efforts. I'm the one supporting you, not so you can fight with me. I didn't respond, nor did I argue. Deep down, I asked myself if I had done enough for her over the years. Even her family, I had been secretly supporting. Otherwise, as an art student, how could she have settled in Beijing right after graduation? It's fine. That's your freedom. I won't interfere. Hearing this, Joanna paused. A look of doubt flashed across her face. She seemed unable to believe what she had just heard. After hanging up, I lay back in my hospital bed. My assistant tried to comfort me. Boss, don't be angry. It's normal for young girls to enjoy life. When she gets bored, she'll naturally come back to the family. I couldn't help but scoff and shake my head. Will Joanna change? Impossible. Over the years, I've caught her in flirtations with other men more than once. At the gym with her trainer, in massage rooms, getting full-body spa treatments from male therapists, and countless other times. Since she loves to have fun so much, I'll just let her be. After a few days in the hospital, I had to discharge myself early to attend an important event. During my time in the hospital, Joanna hadn't sent a single message. All I saw were a series of consumption records. She had bought a lot of luxury items for men. I didn't think they were for me. Back at the company, I went straight to my office. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Dominic sprawled on the couch with his legs wide open, and Joanna was crouching between them. When she heard the noise, Dominic hurriedly stood up. Joanna, with her back to me, scolded without turning her head. Who's there? Don't you know how to knock? It's me, I said in a low voice. Joanna trembled and quickly turned around, her eyes flashing with both anger and shock. Why are you back? I thought you were in the hospital. You discharged without telling me. I was planning to find time to visit you. Really? I sneered. Wasn't I the one who was busy? Didn't you have time to see me? Her expression changed, and she hastily tried to explain. What do you mean? Domi just had something stuck on his pants. I was just wiping it off. Nothing happened. I glanced at Dominic, whose outfit matched the purchase records on my phone. It's fine. I believe you. My tone was flat, without a single emotion. but that made Joanna uneasy. She stammered, unsure of what to say next. Just then, Joanna's younger brother, Diego, walked in. Romeo, I need to speak to Dominic. Could you let him come out for a moment? Chapter 6. Joanna's brother, Diego, had been working at my company ever since he graduated. Compared to Joanna, he had a much stronger business sense, which was why I had promoted him despite his lack of seniority. I knew he was here to help his sister out. I glanced at the group and then turned to leave. Today was the retirement party of one of the company's longtime employees, and I had reserved a spot at a 5-star hotel. All the executives from the company were attending, but Joanna insisted on bringing Dominic along. He's my assistant. What's wrong with that? She dragged Dominic into the car. I vaguely heard Diego lower his voice and scold her. Sis, this is an important event. What are you doing bringing him along? Joanna spoke with disdain. It's just a dinner. I want Domi to see the world. What's the big deal? I'm the CEO. Who dares to criticize me? Diego gave me an awkward look. I shrugged nonchalantly. It doesn't matter. It's just one more pair of chopsticks. That made the 3 people in the car uneasy. When we arrived at the hotel and sat down, the hotel manager came over with a smile. Miss Joanna, would you like the wine you have stored here to be brought up? Wine? I was confused. This place had just opened, and I had never been here before, so I didn't know about any stored wine. Before I could react, Dominic casually spoke up. Yes, bring it up. That's when I understood. He was the gentleman the manager had referred to. The company's longtime employees exchanged glances. Joanna kept her head down, her face filled with awkwardness. When the wine arrived, I immediately recognized the brand. Romanée-Conti white wine. Just one bottle costs thousands of dollars. I smiled faintly. Thanks to Joanna's generosity, we're now able to taste wine worth thousands of dollars. Joanna's face turned a little awkward. Domi used to be a wine sommelier overseas. I just wanted him to taste it so that we wouldn't end up with a counterfeit one. Everyone in the room was sharp enough to not comment, though they were all well aware of the situation. After a few rounds of drinks and dishes, I stepped out to take a call. When I returned, I saw my assistant and a few others pouring wine into Dominic's glass. It seemed they were doing this to relieve some of my frustration. Joanna's face darkened as she sharply reprimanded. Enough, all of you. Can't you see Domi's already had too much to drink? He has a stomach condition. This is going to be a problem. As she scolded them, she snatched the wine glass from Dominic's hand and drank it in one gulp. Watching this, I couldn't help but think back to a time long ago. Because of long nights of socializing, I had developed a stomach ulcer. Before I recovered, I had to attend an unavoidable business gathering. Joanna and I attended together, and facing the toasts from our clients, I had to force myself to drink. But after just a few drinks, my stomach churned, and I felt intense pain. I looked at Joanna for help, but she merely looked at me with disdain. How embarrassing. You need your wife to shield you from drinking. If you can't handle your alcohol, you'd better practice more. Otherwise, no one will want to dine with you in the future. I thought it was just her way of thinking, but now I realize, it was all about who the person was. Joanna was about to explode, pulling Dominic's hand to leave, but upon seeing me, she immediately reflexively released her grip. Honey, don't misunderstand. These people kept making Domi drink. He's had too much. If this continues, he won't be able to handle it. Diego, standing nearby, turned pale and kept tugging at her sleeve. Sis, stop this. Let go of him. Chapter 7. Joanna ignored everything, continuing to shout her complaints. Dominic provocatively glanced at me. Romeo, don't misunderstand. My sister is just worried that I'm drinking too much and it's bad for my health. She's just concerned. That's all. The colleagues around us all changed their expressions, probably expecting me to fly off the handle, but I just gave a faint smile. It's fine. You're Joanna's brother. It's natural for her to care about you. You guys enjoy your meal. I've got something to take care of, so I'll be leaving now. I turned and walked away, but Dominic got up and grabbed my arm. Romeo, you've got to believe me. I really just think of Joanna as a sister. We're totally clean between us. He emphasized the word clean in an obvious way, his eyes warning Joanna. I smiled calmly. Why would I misunderstand? I'm an older guy. I can't be jealous of someone so much younger. You're young and strong. Take good care of your sister. I shook off his hand and walked away. The awkward tension in the air was unbearable, so all of our colleagues quickly left the table, leaving only the 2 of them. As I walked out, I turned and glanced back. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but I thought I saw a flicker of regret in Joanna's eyes. Maybe I was just seeing things. On the way home, my phone kept buzzing. It was a stream of messages from Joanna. Don't be mad, darling. There's nothing between me and him. The person I'll always love is you. Nothing happened with Domi. Really. Even if it did, it was just a moment of passion. There's no real feelings involved. I calmly took a screenshot of the messages. This was her indirect admission of cheating, wasn't it? But whatever regret she had seemed to vanish as soon as I got home. That night, Joanna didn't return home again. Darling, Domi's stomach problem flared up, and I'm taking him to the hospital. I won't be back tonight. I didn't reply. Instead, I immediately contacted my divorce lawyer, Cecilia, who was also my best friend. When I told her I was getting a divorce, she wasn't surprised at all. She only asked if I was in a hurry. I confirmed I was, but I still decided to give Joanna one last bit of face. I told her it was because of relationship problems, and I wouldn't be asking her to leave with nothing. At 2 a.m., I heard the sound of keys in the door. Seeing me sitting on the couch, she looked surprised. How come you're still awake? I told you not to wait for me. She walked towards me, opened her long arms to wrap around my neck, and leaned in close. She was acting very proactively. This was unusual. In the past, every time we were intimate, she was always resistant. She didn't like me touching her. Even in the 2 years we've been married, we only had intimacy once a month. When she got close, I smelled a faint tobacco scent on her. She didn't smoke, so where did that smell come from? Thinking back to her being with Dominic earlier, I felt disgusted and couldn't help but push her away. Joanna immediately became angry. So now you're disgusted with me? You're a man in your 30s, and in a few more years, that thing won't work anymore. If you don't have kids in the next 2 years, there won't be a chance. Chapter 8. She immediately took off her coat and reached for my belt. I grabbed her hand firmly, my expression calm. In the past few years, every time I brought up the idea of having kids, she would always resist. She'd come up with all sorts of excuses to avoid it. We've been married for 5 years, and we still don't have any children. Now, for her to suddenly bring up having kids, I couldn't help but doubt her motives. I drank too much tonight. Let's do this another time. After I rejected her, she became angry. Are you still mad about the thing with Dominic? I've told you, we're clean. I ignored her and was about to bring up the divorce, but her phone rang again. It was Dominic's exclusive ringtone. Hello, Domi, what's up? What? All right, I'll be right there. She hung up and immediately rushed to leave. Domi's stomach problem is acting up. I have to go. Don't misunderstand. I'm just going to accompany him because of his stomach issues. I scoffed. Go ahead. I won't think too much. After all, he's your little brother. She paused for a second but didn't say anything. She quickly rushed out. I immediately pushed for the divorce papers to be finalized while also instructing the finance team to cancel Joanna's bank cards. The next morning, while I was discussing the divorce with Cecilia, Joanna stormed in, fuming. Romeo, what do you think you're doing? Why did you cancel my bank cards? Do you know how embarrassing you made me today? When she noticed Cecilia sitting next to me, her eyes widened in disbelief. Ah, I see now. So you've started an office romance, a man in his 30s, and you're still having an affair. I want a divorce. I'm going to make sure you leave with nothing. I'm going to take back all the money you've spent on this woman. I couldn't help but sneer. Had she forgotten how her current life came to be? At the end of the day, she was just an employee at my company. Before I could speak, Cecilia couldn't hold back anymore. What are you talking about? No wonder Romeo wants a divorce. You're making a scene and you're filled with surgery scars. It's really disgusting. I was stunned. I had known Cecilia for years, but this was the first time I'd seen her this angry. As Joanna was about to continue arguing, I spoke coldly. Joanna, Cecilia is my divorce lawyer. You better not make a scene. She froze at the mention of divorce. Her eyes widened in disbelief. You mean, you want a divorce? She couldn't understand. Aren't you over it yet? She was right. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't care anymore. I gestured to Cecilia, and she immediately handed me a document. This was a list of all the expenses Joanna had incurred over the past year, compiled by Cecilia. She had spent over $5 million on Dominic alone. I'm not angry, I said. I just want a divorce and to recover the $5 million you spent on Dominic. Chapter 9. Hearing my words, Joanna didn't show much reaction, but Dominic immediately panicked. He grabbed Joanna's arm, his eyes full of guilt and anxiety. Joanna immediately became defiant. Don't even think about it, Romeo. When did you become so stingy? Besides, your money is my money. I have the right to manage it. She tried to tear into me, but Cecilia stepped in and blocked her. In the scuffle, Joanna suddenly screamed, "What are you doing? Pushing me? Romeo, I'm carrying your child, and you're letting this woman lay hands on me." Her reaction was intense, which only further confirmed what I had suspected after hiring a private investigator a while ago. She was pregnant. Divorce is fine. As for assets, we'll split everything in half. Don't expect anything more from me. You can deduct it from my share. She spoke with an air of superiority, as though she had already won. Dominic relaxed, proudly hooking his arm around Joanna's. I shook my head with a slight smile. Originally, I planned to show her some mercy, but since she didn't know when to stop, she couldn't blame me for being heartless. I pulled out the evidence of her multiple affairs and placed it on the table. These were photos taken by the private investigator I hired earlier. The two of them were flaunting their relationship online every day, so their whereabouts were easy to track. When I saw the photos for the first time, I was shocked. The once pure and innocent school beauty who had been in front of me was, in fact, a disgraceful woman, seeking pleasure under the bodies of men. Looking at the obscene photos, Joanna's face immediately drained of color. This is fake. It's AI face swapping. Romeo, you're so vicious to slander me like this. I didn't even bother to waste time with her and coldly interrupted. Either wait for the court to sue you, or sign the divorce papers and leave. Your choice. Joanna's face turned from green to pale. Though she was foolish, she knew that if the court ruled, she would most likely lose everything due to her infidelity. Dominic, standing by, egged her on. Sis, just sign it. You still have 2 properties under your name, right? After selling them, they'll be worth about 10 million. After paying him back, you'll still have 5 million. What's there to be afraid of? Joanna gritted her teeth and nodded reluctantly. After signing the divorce agreement, she threw the pen at me. Romeo, I'm waiting for the day you beg me to come back. Without me, you wouldn't have the life you have today. I'll wait and see, when you have nothing left, which woman would want you. After selling the properties, Joanna, with over 5 million in hand, spent some time living lavishly with Dominic. Their social media profiles showcased their extravagant lifestyle, but how long could 5 million really last? Less than 2 months later, Joanna came knocking on my door. I had already informed the security not to let her in no matter how much she caused a scene, but I still underestimated her shamelessness. She completely disregarded the onlookers and knelt at the entrance of my company, screaming with all her might, I was wrong. Husband, please forgive me. I swear, nothing happened with Dominic. The only person I truly love is you. Chapter 10. Under the scorching sun, her skin was burnt red, and her entire demeanor looked drained, but I felt no sympathy at all. Even Diego, who had noticed the scene, didn't think of stepping in to ask for leniency. In the evening, I invited Cecilia out for dinner, to thank her for her help during this time, but as soon as I stepped outside, Joanna suddenly appeared from who knows where and dropped to her knees with a thud. Her face was streaked with tears, her voice hoarse and choking. Romeo, don't do this. Please don't use this woman to provoke me. I'm your wife. Let's remarry. Okay. I promise I'll love you well from now on, and never make you angry again. I'll have a child with you. All right. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow when she mentioned having a child. Was she doing this to give the child in her belly a name, or was she trying to return to the luxurious life of a rich wife? In any case, it was clear she wasn't genuinely repenting or realizing her mistakes. I ignored her, grabbing Cecilia's arm and walking quickly toward the car. For the next few days, Joanna showed up at the company building, like clockwork. Every day, when I didn't respond, she actually went to my parents' house. But my parents had never liked her. If it weren't for me insisting on marrying her, they would never have agreed. Mom, Dad, I'm pregnant with Romeo's child. Are you really going to let your grandchild be abandoned? Hearing that she was pregnant, my parents showed some reaction, but I could feel my expression darken. Do you really need me to ask whose child is in your belly? Joanna's face went pale. Romeo, I promise I'll cut ties with Dominic. You're my only husband. I scoffed. Joanna, I don't know where you get the nerve to say these things. Didn't you feel disgusted when you were sleeping with those men? She remained silent, tears flowing without a word. I directly kicked her out, but just as she stepped out, Dominic suddenly appeared from nowhere and grabbed her by the neck. Joanna, you filthy woman, didn't you say you were just pretending to remarry Romeo, to get the money and give it to me? Now you're thinking of having my child call someone else dad. Dominic became more and more enraged, and slapped Joanna hard across the face. Joanna screamed, and the two began to tussle. But how could she possibly be a match for a man? She was soon knocked to the ground with a slap. Then, with red eyes, he glared at me. Romeo, you've got so much money, why don't you share some with us? Joanna and I made a mistake, so why won't you let it go? I laughed coldly. Fine, I can give you money, but Joanna, I looked down at her crumpled form on the floor. You either abort the child and remarry me, or go raise the child with your dummy brother in some rented apartment. You choose. Upon hearing this, Joanna scrambled to her feet, crawling up to clutch my leg. I'll marry you again. I'll abort this bastard child right now. See, in front of money, even her lover's child was considered a bastard. Dominic, with bloodshot eyes, rushed forward, pulling her hair and beating her with fists and kicks. You're asking for death. *************************************** slut. You think you can abort my child? I'll kill you. Now that Joanna had no more money and was ready to abandon him, Dominic no longer pretended to be nice. His true face came out. Joanna screamed for help, but I just watched coldly. These two were the same type of people, ready to give up everything for money. About 10 minutes later, Joanna stopped moving, blood slowly trickling down her thigh. Dominic panicked, trying to flee, but I called the security to stop him and immediately dialed for an ambulance. At the hospital, when the doctor said that the child might not be saved, Joanna didn't seem saddened at all. Instead, she became excited. Great, Romeo. Now that the bastard is gone, you'll remarry me, right? I didn't speak but decisively called the police. Dominic was sentenced to 3 years in prison for intentional injury. Not only that, but Joanna's parents weren't ones to let it go either. They demanded Dominic pay for the damages. After leaving the hospital, Joanna came knocking again. Romeo, I know I was wrong. Please let me come back home. I can still give you a child. How laughable. I smirked coldly. Joanna, I forgot to tell you, the doctor said you suffered major bleeding and can no longer carry a child. In other words, you can't even be a proper woman anymore. Joanna froze, and then shook her head in disbelief. No, that's impossible. I don't believe it. I slapped the medical report on the table in front of her and turned to close the door. After that day, Joanna didn't come back. Her parents, seeing that she had no money, kicked her out. The next time I saw her was in the red light district. She was dressed provocatively, sitting in front of a massage parlor, flirting with passing men. She had finally brought herself to this pathetic state. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, and she stood up, seemingly planning to come toward me. Drive. I instructed the driver. In the rearview mirror, I saw Joanna collapse to the ground, crying hysterically. From then on, my life returned to normal. Being single gave me more time to focus on self-improvement, and the company's profits kept rising. Looking back at the past, I could only laugh. When we were young, we longed for stability and sought validation from others. But after going through this failed marriage, I finally understood. All those things you try to obtain, eventually, they will end up controlling you. The only one who will never betray you is the person who truly loves you, yourself. The past is just a prelude. What matters now and in the future is what lies ahead.